Okay, so we're live streaming. I think we're live right now. Uh, just as an update, uh, there are I think 2,300 or a little over 2,300 confirmed cases of COVID-19 or the Wuhan flu in New York right now. It's probably much more than that, but those are the last time I checked. It was around a little over 2,300. There's a 1,000 bed hospital ship coming into New York Harbor. These are the type of ships you see after major natural disasters, and you usually see them in places like Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, or in outside of the U.S. Uh, Very often, the U.S. will send them to facilitate aid, food after some sort of natural disaster strikes. And one of those is headed to New York. Ridership in terms of mass transit, I think the LIRR, it's down almost 70%. Metro North, I think it's down 80 or 90%. So people aren't traveling upstate. They're not commuting to work from Long Island. Hi David. Hi Miss Piggy. Yeah, there are a couple of there. I saw a Facebook update from someone I know who is traveling. I actually think she's traveling back to New York. She lives in New York City and she's traveling back here from California or traveling to California from New York. I'm not sure. Hi, Inky. New Jersey, yeah, I mentioned this the other day, but New Jersey has this unofficial or semi-official quarantine. The genius governor there decided to mandate that people strongly recommend that people not leave their houses between 8 a.m. and 12 p.m. Or 12 a.m. rather. So, hi, Ruxby. There's also, I think, in Hoboken, there's a curfew. So there's an actual curfew in Hoboken. There might be in other cities in New Jersey. I'm not sure. And it's kind of hard to keep track of everything that's happening, to be honest. There's so many. It just seems like things are escalating every day. I was actually watching the press conference earlier. Uh, the, the press conference given by the White House and listening to officials. They were talking about the rate of infection. I think in South Korea, it's really uh, I don't know. It's kind of disturbing when you actually look at some of the reports from Italy or France, particularly the lung tissue that they're examining from these people who are in their 20s and 30s with no preconditions, not who aren't don't have pretty good immune systems, and but nothing nothing much has changed in terms of the at least in New York, the shelter in place order that De Blasio wanted to implement. Governor Cuomo has said that that's not going to happen. So, so the personal political feud between the governor and the New York, both the mayor of New York, neither of whom I think should be in office, that actually might work to the advantage, uh, to our advantage. Is it cutting out? Oh no, I hope not. Can can the people watching? Uh, I mean, aside from David, is anyone else having that problem? Is it buffering? I cannot tell on my end. Usually, if it stops, if the stream stops, it or cuts out entirely, I can tell. But if it's buffering, I can't really um tell. All right, I'll go on assuming that it's not that you can actually hear what I'm saying and see me. But anyway, uh Okay. Should I try to start the stream again? This is. Are you sure? I hate this when I have no idea what's because I'm streaming. I have no idea what it looks like on your end because it might be a technical issue. One of the things I was curious about. Um, One of the things I was curious about is the fact that no one or a large percentage of people are just not leaving their home and they're they're watching videos on YouTube or they're streaming Netflix or Hulu. Uh, what type of strain that's going to put on the someone? It's funny. There's a comedian, Joe DeRosa, who made a joke who made a joke that this is all a conspiracy by Netflix to get people to watch the 5,000 new series that they've produced. And it's true. I don't have Netflix, but if you look, Netflix has a new no, I'm in New York. I'm in New York City, which is a giant petri dish for infectious diseases in the best of times. Forget about a global pandemic. It's probably not the place to be. It's true. There've been, I think, yesterday alone there were like half a dozen. I know Mike Winger did a live stream, and Jeff Cran I think did two live streams. He actually or actually he premiered a conversation he had. He premiered it at 3 in the morning 3 in the morning here. I think I guess in Arizona it was maybe past midnight or 1 o'clock. Um, but yeah, there was Jeff Cran and Mike Winger and I forget who else. But yeah, there've been a bunch of people live streaming because they're confined to their homes, so there's not really any other option. Um, Midnight for Jeff, yeah. So that was actually an interesting conversation he had about the um well, he talks a lot about theophany, these appearances of God, particularly in the Old Testament, uh, like Moses who saw him in a burning bush, and he was having this conversation where he was trying to explain some of the orthodox objections or rabbinical objections to the idea of the incarnation and how you address them and the way that rabbinic rabbinic Judaism kind of has detached itself from looking at the biblical text, particularly in prophetic books and books like Daniel, where you can look at the Old Testament and the you can find a Christology in so many parts of the Old Testament. The Especially when you see a description of the Messiah in Proverbs, there's a verse. Let me see if I can find it. Kind of doing this on the fly. Let me just see if I can find where it is. Okay, so in Proverbs 30, it begins the words of Agur, the son of Jakeh, even the prophecy. Okay, so this is a prophetic verse. The man spake unto Ithiel, even unto Ithio and Ukal. Surely I am more brutish than any man, and have not the understanding of a man. I neither learned wisdom nor have the knowledge of the holy. Who hath ascended up into heaven, or descended? Who hath gathered the wind in his fists? Who hath bound the waters in a garment? who hath established all the ends of the earth. What is his name? And his, this is referring to God, of course. And what is his son's name? Sons, if thou canst tell. So you have these things in the Old Testament that are very explicit. The psalmist, too, of course, references the son. And, this is in addition to, Abraham on the plains of Mamre. He sees three men. You find these things throughout the Old Testament, and it's kind of it's really hard to kind of twist it around and make it out that these aren't prophetic verses, that these things aren't talking about the Messiah, and that the Messiah that's being described doesn't fit the specifications, that Jesus doesn't fulfill these prophetic verses. It's hard to kind of work around this, so you have to rely on, well, you're not understanding the Hebrew correctly, and Jeff Cran addressed that. Yeah, I think he brought up the idea of a bar mitzvah, what the word bar means. So it's really simple to kind of attack these objections when you have to rely on, basically, well, you don't understand the Hebrew text. But when people who do understand the Hebrew, they can address that. It's kind of reminiscent of the Muhammad Hijab debate, when he was debating David Wood, this idea that Allah doesn't pray to, uh, 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 or Allah doesn't pray, and pray to, not pray for. And it got into this whole circular argument, which basically proved that David Wood was correct. But this is the thing: you have to rely on these technical details in order to avoid something that's very explicit when you just read the text and accept it at face value. The task force up? Are they still? Is the White House? Are they still up? Are they still holding the press conference? I know I was looking at it. I was watching it earlier. In the UK, they are locking down slowly from Friday. All schools, shops are getting empty. McDonald's, KFC, only drive-through or takeaway. Yeah, you can't eat. There are no dining in options. Pretty much, I know I think I mentioned it yesterday, but in Fort Lauderdale, they closed all of the restaurants. Well, I mean, press conferences are useful. I mean, they're more, at least the in terms of getting an updated idea of what's happening. I mean, the number of infections. No, I understand, Miss Bluebird. I'm not gonna belabor this. I just wanted to yes, I'm actually a moderator on David Wood's channel, Act 17 Apologetics. I'm a big fan. I was talking about the Muhammad Hijab David Wood debate, but I actually I did a couple of videos reviewing that, since I attended the debate and I witnessed what happened. And for people who weren't there, it was a bizarre encounter. It was basically superintended by the Muslim Students Association, which is an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, and the audience was 90% Muslims. And it was bizarre to actually witness their reactions to certain things. Like, Mohammed Hijab was a carnival barker. Basically, he didn't present any real arguments. He just went out there and acted like it was an MMA press conference. But they applauded him, and even when David Wood would quote actual verses from the Quran, it would. I remember one time he quoted a verse from the Quran and they laughed, which gives you an indication that they haven't actually read the Quran. Yeah, David Wood had a couple of debates recently. He had a debate with Matt Dillahunty. I think I mentioned this in one of the videos, and he's debating a pastor, a Malaysian pastor. I forget if that's today or tomorrow, but the Dillahunty debate I discussed in the last video. uh, Dillahunty, I think I mentioned this, but Dillahunty, he uses a lot of circular reasoning, and he's one of these types of guys. He tries to fixate on his own weird interpretation of language. For example, he'll accuse of his opponents of not making an argument, and then he'll create his own definition of what an argument is. Uh, um, but but anyway, in terms of the coronavirus, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the the kind of weird di- dis, disjuncture you're saying between what we're being told and what we're hearing about in terms of the threat of this, and the responses in certain areas, particularly in terms of borders and migration. Now, it's great that travel to China, travel from China was stopped, but they're still resettling refugees. I think I saw some of the numbers. I think there in one day there was 190 refugees resettled, which doesn't seem like a lot, particularly when you compare it to the previous administration. One of the things the president has done that's actually really good. I know he's been criticized a lot, uh, even by people like Ann Coulter for not doing enough on immigration. But one of the good things he's done is more than halve refugee resettlement. He's cut it, actually more than half, maybe 65, 70%. He's downscaled it, which is great. Um, but they're still resettling hundreds of refugees. That's one of the reasons the numbers seem smaller. But to do that in the middle of a global pandemic where you have hundreds of thousands of people already who've been confirmed to have the coronavirus, and thousands who've died, it really seems it's mystifying when you look at it in that context. And they're only talking about closing the border now. This is after it spread to virtually every state with the exception of West Virginia. They're discussing perhaps closing the border, and they're doing coronavirus tests on migrants at the border now, which to me, this is the most insane part. The idea of allowing, and a lot of these people are already susceptible to illness. They're already sick. Some of them might have undiagnosed illnesses. To just keep this process going as if nothing's happened, as if there's not the coronavirus just rampaging across the continent is kind of insane, in my opinion. Uh, it doesn't make a lot of sense, and it shows the kind of skewed priorities. This is one of the problems I have with people who say that who want to entrust their faith in the government, and the idea that the government is going to protect people. And I mean, that might be the theory, but I don't really see that a lot in terms of the actual motivation for the people who control the government. It's not really to protect citizens. I mean, that's one of the reasons now they're thinking of releasing inmates, basically. Not just, I know in Philadelphia they're already doing it. If they haven't done it already, the DA there, Larry Krasner, is basically a red diaper baby. He's a Marxist, and they're considering, the Department of Corrections is thinking of doing it in New York, and Hi, Mark. Yeah, the stock market is probably not doing well. That's I might talk about that in another video, but the idea of the Fed has cut the rate to zero and is just pumping cash in. But again, there's not that many people working. Everyone is homebound, so how that's intended to boost the consumer economy is really. Yeah, the Nadal Hassan Malik. I think that was the name of this guy. Was basically a protege of Nadal Malik Hassan. I might be inverting the names, but he was basically a protege of Anwar Awlaki, who was a Yemeni Muslim who lived here up until the September 11th attacks, and in the weeks afterward, he he went around promoting the idea that Islam is peace, but in Arabic language, uh, Arabic language messages, he would tell his mosque that you know kill the infidel, drive them out wherever you find him, which is taken from the directly from the Quran, and he was basically he was an accomplice to 9/11, and eventually he was assassinated by a predator drone. But the idea that this guy was allowed to live in the United States for decades, and he only left the United States after a couple of months after the 9/11 attacks, basically. And once he left, of course, he joined Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula and started organizing direct attacks on the United States. Oh yeah, I saw the video by David. Well, I think what happened was they opened Mecca, they closed Mecca and Medina, and they supposedly sanitized it. I know that Saudi Arabia has, I don't know if they put a complete halt, but they've pretty much um, halted, I think, Muslim pilgrims coming into Mecca and Medina. I could be wrong about that, but I think they've. Uh, One of the reasons is that Iran is kind of like the typhoid Mary of the Middle East now. They've spread infection throughout the entire Middle East. They're basically the reason that you have people infected in Lebanon and probably Syria, even though Syria is denying it. There are probably coronavirus cases in Syria. Probably Jordan. Jordan, I think, has imposed. Um, they've basically shuttered businesses, and they're on the verge of imposing martial law. Uh, they've infected all of these, and one of the ironies is that they probably also infected some of the leaders of Hezbollah because even though you have a virus that's killing thousands of people in that country, that's infected I think 8% of the Iranian parliament, that's killed 4 or 5 Pasdaran commanders, they still need to coordinate terror activity throughout the Middle East. So they're still meeting with the heads of Hezbollah in Kitab Hezbollah in Iraq and the Yemeni equivalent of Hezbollah. So they still have to coordinate terrorism across the Middle East. So uh, they're infecting the people that they've entrusted with attacking. You know, killing everyone. Um, yeah, Iran is in a bad place because it's run by psychopaths. And I mentioned this in the last video, but the idea of God's providence and the you look at certain things like the fact that this in Iran it started and it erupted in the middle of Qom, which is their holiest city. This is where all the mullahs and ayatollahs come from, and where they have their seminaries, and that's the place that's infected, and that's one of the reasons you have so many parliamentarians. You have so many people. I made the quip that the coronavirus has done more to affect regime change in Iran in 4 weeks than the U.S. government has in 4 decades, and it's just lopping off. I think in Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps commander, another one just died. They've been releasing political prisoners. Yeah, that shows you how desperate the situation is in Iran, even though I mean, some of them, I think a British prisoner that they've been holding hostage, they released him. Uh, well, it's funny. I think wearing a niqab would actually I don't know if that would protect you. That probably make it more likely that you would be infected because you have this robe that's basically collecting germs from everywhere. You'd probably be more. It's kind of like what was that they recommended that men shave their beard because that's so like that would probably be yeah. Yeah, women in Iran, well, anywhere in the Muslim world, they don't have an enviable position. But anyway, I just wanted to talk about that. The whole idea of keeping the borders open, it's really untenable. But that was a good point. The the general, I forget who it was, whether it was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. It was a high-ranking general who made that comment that we shouldn't sacrifice diversity, even if it means we're going to be killed by jihadists. It was the most insane. It just illustrated how dysfunctional and how dysfunctional the government is and how they look at threats. Hi, Love and Light. But yeah, that was a good analogy. I think it illustrates the misplaced priorities of the people in charge. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. I'll try not to interrupt the briefings, uh, or frankly, you can watch those if it. You don't have to. You don't have to watch my lives. I'm not. Um, it's not that urgent. I just wanted to post some of my thoughts. But yeah, by all means, watch the press conferences if they're actually if they're disclosing important information. Like I said, even some of the things that I said, like were there 2,300 cases? I'm sure by now, some of this information is really time sensitive. I mean, I'm sure by tonight there will be more. What was it? In one day, there was an increase of 800 cases, at least in New York. It's really spreading rapidly. Um, but yeah, pray for the people there, the people that are subject to even worse situations than we are. And I will see all of you next time. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I really appreciate it.